So many people can understand English perfectly, but when it's time to speak, they freeze. Why does this happen, Ali?
Exactly. It's like your brain knows the words, but your tongue forgets them.
So understanding the cultural context is key.
Absolutely.
Right, Zidane.
Absolutely. It adds so much depth to the language. And I think it's important to have that conversation.
Absolutely. It really sets the tone for everything else.
The biggest mistake is being afraid of making mistakes.
Exactly. Every mistake is just one step closer to fluency, Hazib. So keep speaking, no matter what. So start today, Hud. Talk to yourself, your friends, or even your mirror in English.
Because the more you speak, the better you get by. Simple as that.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in, well, one of the really big cultural shifts happening right now, this relentless chase for fame. Fame almost as its own reward. We've got a fascinating stack of sources here looking into, the appeal of shortcuts, how social media just sped everything up, and this sort of fundamental change and why people even want it. Our mission today, pretty straightforward. We want to unpack why taking a shortcut to the spotlight seems so appealing, maybe even dangerously so, and what actually happens when you try to skip the hard part, the struggle, and just aim straight for the spectacle. When you look across these sources, one observation just jumps out. So many people now seem to want to be, just famous. Yeah. Not necessarily famous for a particular talent or, for achieving something specific. It's famous. It's like fame itself has shifted from being a side effect of great work to being the main goal, the career path. What's your take on that immediate desire?
It tells you, I think, that there's this growing aversion, maybe, to the process, the incubation period. People want to skip the messy middle, the learning, the failing, the building, and just sort of teleport to the finish line, straight onto the stage. You really nailed the core tension there. You've got a generation that grew up seeing the highlight reel, the viral moment. They didn't necessarily see the decade of practice that might have come before it. So they've kind of internalized this idea, and it's a really flawed one, that success just arrives now with, the right filter or good lighting, not focused effort. And that creates a huge gap, psychologically speaking, because the sources are really clear on this. Every single overnight success story that actually lasts, it has years, maybe even decades of unseen work behind it. Preparation, failure, rejection, all that invisible stuff. But the shiny final product, that viral moment, it completely hides that essential struggle.
That difference, the visible versus the invisible, that feels absolutely central. Okay, so let's dive into section 1. The game changer. Social media? It didn't just give people a bigger audience, did it? It fundamentally changed the definition of what success even looks like. I mean, think about it. Before, you often needed gatekeepers, a record label, a studio, maybe a degree, something. Now, the path to getting seen can literally start from your bedroom.
Absolutely. That need for traditional validation, it just sort of crumbled almost overnight. You don't need a fancy stage. You don't really need a solid plan sometimes, as long as you've got an internet connection. You just need like one trending sound clip on TikTok, or maybe one really dramatic, perfectly edited storytime video. And suddenly, boom, you can have a follower count that, a musician 5 years ago might have spent ages building through tours and radio play.
And this ease of access, the speed, it has to change how creators relate to their own work, right? If the path seems short, maybe cheap, and it's all driven by getting eyeballs, then the reason for creating shifts. People might stop creating from that inner drive, that sense of purpose, or wanting to share a message, and instead start chasing the external thing, attention.
You see that pivot everywhere. It becomes about creating to impress the audience rather than creating to express something genuine, some deeper skill or idea. And what's really interesting is how the platforms themselves, the algorithms, they kind of nudge you in that direction. They tend to favor the reactive stuff, the high emotion content things designed to grab attention quickly over maybe slower, more thoughtful content that's about expressing real, lasting value.
Right, which leads straight into this idea of the validation trap that the sources talk about.
Exactly. Look, it's human to want appreciation. We all do. Yeah. But what's happening now is that self-worth gets tangled up with these really unstable things. It's not about mastering a skill anymore. It's tied to cold, hard numbers, likes, shares, comments, follower counts.
And that's the toxic part, isn't it? Those numbers go up and down like crazy. They're unstable currency for your self-esteem, so your sense of value is constantly on shaky ground. People stop asking the useful questions like, am I getting better at this? Am I actually growing? And instead, they shift to this almost desperate daily question, am I trending?
Yeah, and the research backs this up. This dependence It creates a kind of negative feedback loop. Every time someone unfollows or a post doesn't do well, it can feel like a personal hit, chipping away at that self-worth. It forces people to become hyper-aware of how they're performing. Constantly. Social media essentially turns everyone into, well, an actor. You have to constantly perform your best moments, the most dramatic bits, the most enviable scenes, all while carefully hiding the struggled, boring bits, the essential time spent actually building the skill behind the scenes.
Which takes us right into the hidden costs, section 2. That performance, that quick viral rush, it's like instant dopamine, right? A great feeling in the moment. But it often comes without any real sense of direction. You've had the spotlight, maybe, but you haven't built the structure underneath to keep it going. There's a really striking story in the sources that illustrates this perfectly. It's about this guy who went massively viral for a very specific, funny prank video, hit like 1 million views in a week. Instant fame, instant dopamine hit.
Right. And that's where the cautionary part of the tale kicks in. He apparently spent the next few months just desperately trying to recreate that first hit, that luck. He tried setting it up the same way, changed the jokes, used different cameras. Nothing landed like the first one because the original moment wasn't really a strategy. It was kind of an anomaly, a lightning strike. So he had the attention, but he didn't have a core purpose or a skill he was building on. And without that direction, that foundation based on mastery or real passion, the moment just faded. And the sources say he ended up feeling pretty useless. It's almost a textbook example of what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill effect playing out.
The hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. For listeners who aren't familiar, can you unpack that a bit? How does that apply here?
Sure. So the basic idea of the hedonic treadmill is that humans tend to return to a sort of stable baseline level of happiness pretty quickly, even after major positive things happen, like winning the lottery, or in this case, going viral. So that first 1 million views feels amazing, right? An incredible high. But because it often comes so fast, maybe feels a bit unearned in terms of sustained effort, the satisfaction wears off fast. Then, to get that same feeling again, the next success has to be even bigger, maybe 10 million views next time. And when that doesn't happen, which it usually doesn't, the person can actually feel worse off than before they even got famous. They're running faster and faster on this treadmill, just trying to feel okay, just to stay in the same emotional place.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like the definition of an unsustainable way to live. If your success is only measured by hitting the next even bigger viral moment, you're basically setting yourself up for failure because that dopamine chase is potentially infinite, but audience attention spans definitely aren't.
Exactly. And this really brings home the core lesson here. Real, lasting success. The kind that builds something meaningful. It needs patience. It doesn't need instant perfection. And the big irony, the sources point out, is that the people who genuinely commit to the slow burn learning, improving their craft, focusing on that internal drive, they often end up getting recognition or becoming well-known anyway. Why? Because consistency tends to beat luck in the long run. Viral moments flash and fade. Skill, actual skill, creates something sustainable.
Okay, but let me push back on that a little. Does that advice still hold up in, say, 2024, if you're being consistent, quietly mastering your thing, but you choose not to play the visibility game, you're not constantly posting and performing? How do you even get noticed in the first place? If you're not engaging with that whole system, are you really still winning?
Yeah.
Or just invisible?
That's a really important question. It raises this essential point about strategy versus just raw effort. The answer isn't no visibility. You still need people to find you, of course. But your purpose dictates your strategy. When you're building on skill, you're aiming for, let's say, a slow-burning, reliable engine, sustainable growth, not trying to win the lottery with a viral hit. So you use social media differently, maybe not to chase likes for validation, but to document your actual journey, your process, your learning. And you attract people who are interested in that same level of mastery, who value what you're actually building. The difference is huge psychologically. The person chasing the shortcut sees the audience primarily as a source of validation, like applause. The person focused on skill sees the audience as people they can genuinely provide value to, people they can connect with over a shared tryst. The first person, they tend to burn out when the likes dry up. The second person, they keep going because their mission is bigger than just the metrics.
That focus on sustained effort, on providing value, it really throws the modern environment into sharp contrast, doesn't it? Which brings us nicely to section 3, this idea of legacy versus likes. If you think about maybe an older generation's perspective or just a more traditional approach, the focus was totally different. They seemed to believe more in, showing concrete results when they were ready, not necessarily live tweeting every single step of the progress. Success was measured more by respect earned through actual application, through the quality of the work, not by popularity measured in clicks and likes. They often built things quietly, revealed the work when it was done, and kind of let the quality speak for itself.
Yeah, they generally operated on this assumption that success should be relatively quiet until it was undeniable, until it couldn't be ignored. Today, that feels like a luxury most people don't think they have. The pressure is completely flipped. Now, if you don't post about it constantly, your workout, your project, your breakfast, people genuinely seem to assume you haven't done anything at all. You almost feel compelled to document the entire messy process, even the parts that maybe should be private, just focused work time. And this creates this just exhausting, nonstop pressure cooker of visibility. People can end up living their lives trying to prove they're doing well instead of just actually being well. They're potentially sacrificing real internal growth and satisfaction for the sake of keeping up this external performative appearance of progress.
And the sources really hammer home the final, maybe saddest consequence of this performance trap. You see so many people who seem to be running flat out on that social treadmill, just trying to show off a life.
Yeah.
That they're not actually taking the time to genuinely enjoy. They're too busy staging it. Staging success for strangers online instead of building and living a fulfilled life for themselves offline. It's like they get so caught up in how their life looks through the phone's camera, through the filter, that they completely miss out on what it actually feels like to live it. And that disconnect, that seems like where the real burnout must set in.
It absolutely is. That whole shift we talked about, from intrinsic motivation doing it for the love of it to extrinsic motivation doing it for the likes. Combine that with the instability of the validation trap, where your worth feels tied to fluctuating numbers. It creates this constant draining need to perform a shinier, happier, busier version of yourself online. And maintaining that facade, bridging the gap between the online appearance and the offline reality, that takes a huge emotional toll.
So let's bring it back to you, the listener, the learner, trying to make sense of all this. We really have to underline the fundamental truth that just keeps coming up in this deep dive. Hard work, real effort, it never really goes out of style. What people sometimes label as slow when they look at someone else's journey, often that's just the necessary time it takes to build something sustainable. We see the fallout every day, don't we? Fame that arrives without a solid foundation, it tends to collapse. And fast. Those personalities who shot up really quickly, maybe because they built their platform on a fleeting trend or just a superficial moment, not on real value, they often seem to have the hardest fall when the trend shifts.
Yeah, and that's the core message here about legacy, I think. Consistency. Okay, it might feel tedious sometimes. It might not look flashy compared to that sudden burst as a viral moment. A lot of it is silent, invisible work. But that consistency, that's what builds the only kind of legacy that actually lasts. So the advice really has to be, try to shift your focus. Move it away from just chasing views and towards creating genuine value. When you focus on making something that actually matters, something you believe in, then any fame or influence that comes from that, it naturally becomes a real voice, not just background noise. Don't feel rushed by comparing your timeline to someone else's curated highlights. Be patient with your own journey, with the process of actually mastering something.
Which leaves us with that final, really provocative question that emerged from the material. And we genuinely want you to sit with this one for a bit. If you're listening today, and maybe you are dreaming of becoming famous, just ask yourself, honestly, famous for what?
Because fame without any real meaning behind it, it's just an echo, it's hollow. But fame that's built on a genuine purpose, on something you care about, that could become a lasting voice. So focus on your passion, focus on the craft, not just the immediate popularity metrics. And remember that the best things, the things that often really change things, they almost always grow slowly, sometimes silently.
Be patient, build your skills, and be authentic. We'll catch you next time for the next Deep Dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So if you've spent any time at all on social media lately, you've definitely run into what we're talking about today. This really intense, sometimes kind of chaotic, modern chase for fame.
Yeah.
We've gathered a pretty fascinating set of materials here looking into this digital gold rush and what your sources are calling the cost of shortcuts.
It's a super relevant bunch of articles and research, definitely, because it gets right to the heart of that feeling, you know, that feeling a lot of us get when we're just scrolling. Like One Piece put it perfectly, seems like everyone wants to be famous now.
Yeah.
But often it's, well, the quote was, not talented. They just want to be famous.
Oof. Yeah, I think that really nails the feeling, doesn't it? So our mission today is to sort of synthesize these insights. We're going to look at how social media basically engineer this shift.
Right.
Talk about the psychological cost, the practical cost. We're going to skip the hard yards, the foundational work, and then ultimately kind of contrast this new path with, well, the old principles of lasting success.
Exactly. And we're really dealing with a core conflict that jumps out from these studies. Fame itself, it seems, has gone from being like a side effect of incredible skill.
Yeah, byproduct.
A byproduct, exactly, to being the actual career goal. And while naturally, when fame is the finish line, the struggle bit, the tough unseen work that builds real talent, that starts to look like an optional detour.
And the inconvenience almost.
Yeah. People want the spotlight, but they want to skip building the stage, basically.
And the sources keep reminding us that this whole idea of overnight success is such a powerful but really misleading paradox.
Oh, totally.
It always hides the years, sometimes decades, of grinding, learning, failing.
Yeah.
All that stuff that happens before that one moment goes viral.
Absolutely. And that invisible prep work, that's what decides if that viral moment is, a launch pad or just a flash in the pan.
Okay, so let's really unpack that. This central idea about the new fame economy.
Yeah.
You've got a whole generation, right, who grew up seeing, well, not the hours, practicing guitar or writing jokes. They saw the end product,
Yeah.
the viral hit. They learned, or think they learned, that success just kind of comes with the right filter, the right trending sound,
Yeah.
not necessarily real, hard, painstaking effort.
And what's really critical here, and this is a major theme across all the documents, is that shift in what the goal actually is.
Right.
Fame itself. That's become the main measure of success. Back in the day, maybe you wanted to be an amazing painter, and if you succeeded, fame might follow.
Maybe.
Maybe, but now the goal often seems to be just be famous.
Right.
The skill itself is almost secondary. The visibility, the outcome has kind of overshadowed the value of the process,
So, okay, if wanting fame is the fuel,
Yeah.
what's the engine? What's actually driving this? It has to be the platform, right? Social media, giving everyone a stage.
It absolutely is, and that's a huge point in the research. The internet basically tore down the old gates.
Yeah.
You didn't need a record deal anymore or a fancy degree or some casting agent to notice you.
Yeah.
The sources really detail this idea that you can become famous literally from your bedroom. All it might take is like one trending sound or maybe one really raw, emotional storytime video, and boom, suddenly you're labeled a creator.
But hold on, isn't that accessibility a good thing, though? Like, isn't it good that more people have a voice? Who are these researchers to kind of judge that?
That's a totally fair point to raise. And the research isn't really arguing against access itself. It's looking at the results, the consequences of that sudden, completely unfiltered access to attention.
Okay.
Because when the path to getting eyes on you is that quick, it fundamentally messes with motivation. Instead of working towards mastery of something,
Right.
people start chasing clicks. And that's where we slide from maybe genuine expression into this really negative consequence the studies call the validation trap.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because this is where that dark side, of instant validation starts to show up.
Yeah.
The sources really break down that subtle but pretty destructive shift. Moving away from creating because you have something to say, something to express, and moving towards creating just to get a reaction, just to impress.
And that switch, it carries huge psychological baggage. It raises this really important question the researchers kept asking. What actually happens to your sense of self, your worth, when it gets completely tied to outside numbers? Likes, views, how many followers you have.
Yeah.
The studies really highlight this intense, sometimes crushing pressure, what they actually termed the validation trap.
It's that moment when creators stop asking themselves, am I getting better at my craft?
Yeah.
And instead, they're obsessively checking, am I trending? Am I still relevant today?
Precisely. And that pressure to keep the numbers high, it basically turns everyone into a performer, an actor.
Right.
People online are constantly curating this highlight reel, right?
Yeah.
Showing off the best moments while carefully hiding the struggle, the boring bits, the self-doubt. They're presenting a life that, honestly, they might not even be enjoying that much.
The sources have this really powerful line, which I think just nails it.
Yeah.
People end up living for the camera, not for the soul. They start confusing that performance with actual reality.
And the deeper problem there is when you anchor your whole identity on what other people think, on that external validation, you lose your own internal compass. The documents note that once that first viral moment inevitably fades, and it always does, these so-called creators often have absolutely no idea what to do next.
Because they never built anything solid.
Exactly. Their identity wasn't built on a real sustainable skill. It was just built on fleeting visibility. They don't know how to pivot or evolve because they were just chasing whatever trend got them noticed in the first place.
Okay, let's make this really concrete. Let's focus on the dangers of that instant fame. There was that anecdote in the source material, the guy who went viral for that funny prank video.
Oh yeah, that case study really, it hammers the point home. This was just, an average guy. Posts a simple prank, gets lucky, it catches fire. Overnight, literally 1 million views in a week. Instant fame.
Wow. And what happened after that? I mean, that must have felt amazing, like winning the lottery.
Well, it felt like a lottery win that quickly turned into a kind of psychological debt. The researchers actually tracked him for the next 6 months or so.
Okay.
And he spent that entire time desperately trying to recreate the luck, trying to engineer another viral hit just like the first one. He got obsessed, started sacrificing his normal life, just chasing that algorithmic lightning again.
But success isn't usually copy-paste, right?
Exactly. It rarely is. And, well, when he couldn't just replicate that high, what happened?
Yeah, what was the fallout?
The crash sounds like it was pretty dramatic. When he talked to the research team later, he admitted he just felt useless because his entire sense of value was tied up in constantly refreshing that virality.
Wow.
And that's the real cost of the shortcut, you see. Instant fame gives you that massive hit of instant dopamine, but absolutely no direction. Get the buzz, the chemical high, but you haven't actually built the underlying structure, the skills, the discipline to sustain it or turn it into something real, like a career.
So you basically built this huge expectation of a massive reward for almost zero real effort. And the second that reward stops coming, the whole thing just collapses.
Precisely. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the data is just overwhelming on this. Real, lasting success takes patience. It takes being able to handle delayed gratification. It takes commitment. It doesn't demand perfection right now, this second,
Right.
which is the complete opposite of that quick hit viral content world, which basically demands immediate high impact perfection every single time you post.
That whole dynamic makes me really curious about the contrast. Like, what would someone with an old school perspective, people who built careers before the internet took over, what would they make of this instant visibility machine?
It's a fascinating contrast, yeah, and your materials definitely spend some time detailing this generational disconnect, you could call it. The older way of thinking, the one rooted in professional craft, it had a totally different value system. They believed in showing results, not posting progress.
Oh, I love that distinction. Say that again. Showing results, not posting progress.
Yeah. Their success wasn't built on how many likes they got this week.
Yeah.
It was built on respect earned over time for their proven skills, their actual abilities.
Right.
They didn't feel the need to document every single grueling practice session or show you the 100 failed drafts just to prove they were working hard. The final product, the high quality work, that spoke for itself.
But the problem today is that whole metric is flipped, hasn't it? The modern pressure, it basically says if you don't document and post every little milestone, people just assume you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
So creators now feel they have to live to prove they're doing well instead of actually being well. God, it sounds exhausting just thinking about performing constantly like that.
And it leads straight back to that core issue of sustainability. The data is really clear. Skill, actual skill, is what creates something sustainable. Viral moments. By their very nature, they're short, they're reactive bursts, they fade, always. The enduring truth that the researchers kept underlining is that consistency always wins. The people who just quietly put their heads down, focus on learning, on improving, on building genuine expertise, they often end up achieving lasting fame anyway.
They might seem slower getting there, but they're building something solid, something they can actually handle it when trends shift or the algorithm changes.
Correct. Fame without a foundation is just inherently unstable. It's like you can rush building a house, right? Cut corners, but that structure isn't going to hold up when a storm hits.
Good analogy.
These quick fame journeys often end just as quickly because they skipped all the foundational learning, the stuff you need to actually adapt and survive when the market inevitably changes. That consistent foundational growth. Yeah, it might look slow, but that's actually what makes the success stick around. Consistency builds a real legacy, not just a, flash in the pan.
Okay, so let's try and tie all these different threads together for you, the listener. The core message, really, from this deep dive seems to be about where you put your focus. Chasing views, chasing likes. That just creates noise. But focusing on creating actual value, on having a purpose, that's what builds something that genuinely matters.
Yeah.
Don't rush your story. Don't rush your process just to look successful to everyone else.
Precisely. So if you are listening today and you're dreaming of achieving something, whether that's actual fame or just mastering a skill you care about, maybe we can encourage you to ask yourself this one final provocative question. Famous for what?
That distinction is absolutely everything, isn't it? Like the materials remind us, fame without meaning is noise, but fame built on purpose becomes a voice. The power really is in the why behind it all.
Exactly. And maybe remember that closing piece of advice from the folks who studied these patterns. It is okay to take your time. The best, most meaningful things often grow slowly, silently. Be patient with your own journey. Focus on the actual improvement, not just the follower count.
Focus on the passion, not the popularity. Well, that's another deep dive complete. We really appreciate you trusting us with your research today. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something, well, pretty fundamental, I think. It's this clash, this real tension between our very human need for appreciation, and the way we get it now, which is often so digital.
Yeah, it's a big one. And it's more than just like how we use our phones. It feels like a deeper shift.
Yeah.
Almost philosophical, wouldn't you say? How we value ourselves, how we value others.
Exactly. And the sources we've gathered for this under this umbrella title, The Performance of Digital Worth, they really they dig into the consequences of that shift.
They really do.
So we've got some fascinating research here looking at this whole new way of operating. Our mission really, for you listening, is to try and understand how these digital numbers, these metrics, haven't just nudged our sense of value, but maybe actually redefined it.
Right, and why that matters. Why this shift impacts how you see success, how you deal with failure, maybe even day to day.
It's about getting past just saying, oh, social media exists, and really thinking about the psychological weight of it all. What happens when your sense of self gets kind of outsourced?
Outsourced to the internet. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The starting point for pretty much all our source material is this basic truth about us, about humans. We crave validation. It's human nature, right? We want appreciation. We're social creatures, deeply social. We kind of evolved needing that feedback loop, that we matter, that people see what we do, that our lives have some worth.
Absolutely. That desire, it's ancient. Goes way back. And forever, that validation came organically from your community, right? Your family, maybe a mentor.
Yeah.
Real feedback tailored to you.
Quality, not just quantity.
Exactly. Quality over quantity.
But what our sources are showing very clearly is that how we measure this appreciation now, it's completely changed. Massively, and maybe sometimes destructively. Suddenly that sort of fuzzy feeling of worth, it's quantified.
Yeah. Turned into numbers. The research suggests people really feel, often implicitly, that their worth depends on numbers.
And this is what you call the measurement trap.
That's the term, yeah. The measurement trap. It's translating something really complex, like human feeling, into just data points. Yep. Cold, hard data. And we're talking specific metrics here.
Things we all see constantly.
Oh, yeah. Scrolling past them all day long. The likes, the shares, the comments count. That's the modern way we get affirmation. And because it's instant.
It's addictive.
Incredibly addictive.
But hang on, what's the specific danger? I mean, isn't getting positive feedback, isn't that motivating in some ways?
Well, yeah, potentially. But the danger seems to be twofold. First, it's the dependency. Your self-worth gets tied directly to those numbers going up or down.
Okay.
And second, it's the mechanism itself. These numbers, they're volatile, they're external to you, and often they're driven by algorithms none of us really understand. So it's not about whether, say, one person you respect connected with what you said. It's about whether it got enough traction, enough velocity online.
Right. So let's say I post something. I put thought into it. I think it's valuable. But it only gets 10 likes. According to the research, what's the psychological fallout from that?
The sources were pretty stark on this. If your worth depends on the numbers, then when you don't get the numbers, well, you internalize that. It becomes a failure of self. The conclusion isn't just, oh, the post didn't do well. It's often, consciously or not, I failed. The specific quote we pulled was, when that numeric appreciation isn't received, people often conclude they think they're failures.
Wow. Okay, that immediately makes it much more serious than just, did my marketing work. You're basically gambling your emotional state on a system you can't predict.
Correct. Your value in this way of thinking isn't inherent anymore. It's conditional. It depends on whether an algorithm smiles on you or on the fleeting attention of the online crowd.
So the measurement trap. It takes that very human need for connection and turns it into something that generates anxiety.
Pervasive insecurity and anxiety, yeah. You're sort of forced into this game where if you're not visibly succeeding, not trending, it feels like you're personally losing.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting. This internal shift that the measurement trap kind of forces on us. We go from what we measure to the actual questions we ask ourselves about our lives, right?
This is maybe the most profound bit we found in the sources. It highlights this huge, often silent shift in focus, like a redefinition of what progress even means.
It contrasts two totally different ways of looking at your life or your career or maybe something creative you're doing.
Exactly.
So the internal way, let's call it the old way maybe. It was about self-assessment, looking inward, asking yourself, am I growing? And that question, it's about effort, right? Learning a skill, figuring something out from a mistake, developing yourself inside. It accepts that real growth is often, slow. It's messy. People don't always see it.
And that mindset, it's pretty resilient, actually, because the measure of success is internal. It's within your control. Did I try? Did I learn? Did I make an effort to get better? You know the answer yourself.
Okay, contrast that with the external way, the new way, driven by these performance numbers. The question completely changes. It becomes, am I trending?
And that change, it sounds small, but it's kind of devastating. Am I trending? It shifts your focus entirely outward.
Right.
It demands immediate relevance. If you're not trending, if you're not generating those high numbers, that high velocity, you feel irrelevant. And that can happen even if you spent, say, 8 hours making real internal progress on something complex.
That internal progress just gets invalidated.
It feels invalidated by the external silence. Yeah.
We should probably put a spotlight on how these two mindsets deal with failure, shouldn't we? If I'm focused on growing and I mess up, what happens?
Well, you iterate, right? You learn from it. Failure is just information. It's part of the process of getting better.
Okay. But if I'm focused on trending and I fail, meaning my post bombs, it gets no traction, what then?
It feels existential. It feels like a personal failure, like we said. So what do? Often you delete it. You hide the failure. And maybe you panic and pivot to whatever you think the algorithm will like next time.
So the focus shifts away from the work itself.
You're just optimizing the outcome, trying to game the system.
It sounds like it strips away the satisfaction of actually getting good at something.
And replaces it with the anxiety of constantly performing for an audience.
Yeah. If you focus on growing, you prioritize depth, you accept mistakes, you iterate. If you focus on trending, you prioritize optimization, polish, and trying to go viral instantly.
And the deep dive suggests these two things. They often just don't mix well, especially for real long-term development.
Often incompatible, yeah. And it can lead to this feeling of just surface-level productivity. You see people constantly busy creating stuff, but they're creating for the trend, not necessarily to build deep skill.
Like optimizing the 5-second video clip. Instead of maybe doing the hours of reading that would make them truly knowledgeable, the algorithm tends to reward speed and shine over maybe sincerity and depth.
Which brings us neatly to the third big point from the sources. If success is now all about those external numbers, then we kind of have no choice but to live in a space where performance is just expected. It's mandatory.
Yeah, the sources make a really critical observation here, that social media has made everyone an actor. It stops being just a tool and it becomes this global stage.
Where the audience is always watching.
Always watching, and the applause is counted in likes and shares.
And that analogy, the actor analogy, is key because actors usually follow a script, right? We're not just sharing our lives, we're kind of staging them, presenting this optimized version. The research backs this up. It says individuals are mostly performing their best moments.
The highlight reel.
Yeah, the vacation pics, the job promotion, the perfect looking meal.
But this performance, it requires leaving a lot out. And this is maybe the crucial bit for, your mental health, your self-perception as a listener. This curated show requires hiding the struggle.
Okay, why? Why does the struggle have to be hidden? Is it just embarrassment, or is there a practical reason tied back to the numbers?
It's probably both. Practically speaking, the failures, the boring bits, the learning curve, the moments you feel vulnerable, that stuff usually doesn't trend well.
Low engagement.
Low engagement gets punished by the algorithm, basically. So you learn pretty quickly to edit it out. And then psychologically, if your worth is tied to those numbers showing vulnerability, it kind of suggests you're not winning.
Right.
Which might risk lowering the numbers you depend on.
So you perform perfection to try and guarantee approval.
That's it. And the second you hide your own struggle, you create what you might call an authenticity gap. Because you, the performer, you know your life is messy. You know about the hidden challenges. But then you look at everyone else's feed, which is also curated, also just highlights, and you start to assume their life actually is like their feed. All best moments all the time.
And that difference, that's the engine driving a lot of modern loneliness, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that feeling of personal failure we talked about earlier, if I compare my messy, unedited reality to your polished highlight reel.
You'll always feel inadequate. Yeah. We're all stuck being the audience for these perfect highlight reels while simultaneously performing our own.
Sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. You're under constant pressure to sort of optimize yourself so other people will consume it. And this burden, it forces this fundamental choice that the source has summed up really powerfully. The difference between living for the camera versus living for the soul.
Living for the camera. This means the external image starts driving your internal choices.
Pretty much. You prioritize how it will look, the lighting, the angle, the caption, how quickly you can get feedback. You're performing a version of yourself that's easy to consume. Like, you cook a nice meal.
And before you eat it, you spend 5 minutes getting the perfect photo.
Exactly. Styling it, lighting it for the camera.
Whereas living for the soul, that's prioritizing what feels true internally. Honesty, actual development, even if it's not pretty or instantly likable.
Right. If you cook that meal, you eat it while it's hot. The enjoyment is the reward, not how many hearts the picture gets. When the camera starts dictating to the soul, you lose the ability to even ask that first question, am I growing? Because you're too busy checking, am I trending?
It leads to this almost transactional view of life, doesn't it? The experience itself isn't the point. Its value is only as potential content.
Yeah. You go on a beautiful trip, but if the photos don't get enough likes, the trip itself can start to feel like, like a failure somehow.
So the sources suggest reclaiming your, I guess, emotional independence means detaching the value of the experience from how well it performs online.
Detaching it from its viral potential, exactly. It means giving yourself permission to grow off camera, basically, to make mistakes nobody sees, and to value the effort, even if it doesn't produce some immediate, measurable public result.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive into the performance of digital worth has been, well, incredibly insightful. We've really taken apart that core tension, haven't we? Understanding that the pressure to perform for those digital metrics, likes, shares, comments, seems to be directly causing us to sacrifice internal growth.
Especially when we prioritize trending over actually growing.
Yeah, we've seen how that pressure builds the measurement trap, leading to that really toxic idea that if you don't get the numbers, you've failed personally.
And how it forces us to hide the messy but valuable struggle just to keep up appearances with the highlight reel.
And the sources gave us that really powerful final choice to think about. Are you living for the camera or living for the soul? We put so much energy into optimizing for that immediate external number.
So much energy.
So maybe let's leave you, the listener, with this final thought to chew on this week, building on everything we've talked about today.
Okay.
If our perception of appreciation, of our own value, is becoming so controlled by these external, often quite random numbers, how might you consciously restructure your non-digital life, your actual offline life, to make sure that effort and depth and internal growth, not trending, remain the main ways you measure your own success, the non-negotiable ways?
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it?
How do you set up benchmarks for your own growth that an algorithm just can't see, can't judge, and ultimately can't take away from you? Maybe reclaiming that right to grow slowly and sometimes messily off camera.
Maybe that's the real act of digital resistance today.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you next time. Okay, let's unpack this whole thing. We're definitely living on a time where, success feels like it should be instant.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That instant ignition.
Exactly. We want that one thing, maybe a video, a post, whatever, to just explode and give us that rush. you know?
Yeah.
The viral moment. It seems like the only thing people talk about sometimes. And that craving, that almost lottery ticket mentality. That's exactly where we're starting this deep dive. We've got some really interesting sources here looking at that contrast, the flash in the pan instant fame versus the much slower path of sustainable skill.
Right. So our mission, really, for you listening, is to try and cut through that noise. We want to show why just chasing that instant hit based on what we're seeing is often kind of a trap.
Strategic trap.
And maybe lay out a clearer path, maybe slower, but towards something that actually lasts, real achievement.
Yeah, because attention here isn't really about like raw talent. It's more about your strategy and maybe your psychology too.
Well, what does instant fame actually give you? Okay, sure, loads of attention, fast, and chemically. Big jolt of dopamine, feels great. But what does building a real skill give you? Stability, actual value people rely on, and a kind of independence. So let's look at the chemistry first. That instant hit, that's where the hook is.
Yeah, the sources really zeroed in on this. There was one story, an anecdote about someone who just, boom, massive success overnight. They made this funny prank video.
And it wasn't just like, oh, that's popular. We're talking serious numbers by today's standards.
Yeah, what was it? 1 million views?
1 million views in just 1 week.
Yeah.
One single week. Imagine that feeling, that sudden validation just washing over you.
Yeah.
It's intoxicating.
It really is. And the sources, they pointed straight to the psychological effect, right? That serves that external validation. It just floods your system with dopamine. It's like the ultimate reward feeling, but without necessarily all the, the hard yards beforehand. It feels earned, but it's more like luck. A random reward.
And that right there, that's the trap. Because what's really fascinating is what that rush doesn't give you. It gives you no framework, no map, critically, no direction.
Okay. Explain that a bit more. No direction.
You get this huge reward before you've built any kind of process, any system to handle that scale, or maybe more importantly, to repeat it on purpose.
Right. You can't reverse engineer the luck.
Exactly. You're just left hoping it happens again.
But hang on, don't you need a bit of that luck sometimes? Just to get seen? I mean, it's so crowded out there. If you don't get some initial spike, how do you break through it all?
That's a fair point.
Sure.
Luck definitely plays a role. Nobody's denying that. But the real danger zone is when you start building your whole strategy, maybe even your identity, around the randomness of it.
Instead of the preparation.
Precisely, instead of the process you can control. And we saw how that played out with the prank video person. They spent months, literally months, trying to recreate that first bit of luck.
Just chasing the same high.
Yeah, tweaking things, copying trends, just sort of hoping, lightning strikes twice.
And the sources mentioned the psychological toll of that. It's like intermittent reinforcement, like a slot machine.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You're pulling the lever, failing most of the time, but that one big win, that 1 million views, keeps you absolutely chained to trying again.
And when it didn't happen again, for this person.
Well, they reported feeling, and this is a quote, useless, because their self-worth got completely tangled up in that external random validation.
Ooh.
They hadn't built a reliable way to create value. They just had one successful event. The skill maybe was editing the video, sure, but not like a sustainable content strategy or really understanding their audience.
Okay, that difference event versus process, that really brings us to the core problem with chasing just these viral moments, doesn't it? What's fundamentally missing?
Well, I think the big missing piece is accepting that real success often involves sustained, sometimes messy effort. It needs patience.
Not perfect.
Exactly. Patience, not perfection. Chasing instant fame. That demands like one perfect launch, one flawless product hitting just right. It makes you focus only on the shiny end result.
And you skip the boring stuff.
You skip the necessary grind, the trial and error, the learning that actually builds mastery. You're always looking for that quick, clean win, the viral moment, not the system behind it.
So if you're just optimizing for that first dopamine hit, the clicks, the views,
Yeah.
you're kind of ignoring what actually matters long term, even to the platforms themselves.
Totally. You're aiming for impressions, which honestly, pretty weak metric. You should be aiming for retention.
Yeah.
Keeping people engaged.
Okay.
And that connects to how these platforms actually work, right? Those instant fame metrics, the quick spike in clicks, they fade super fast. Viral moments, they just poof, they fade.
Because they're temporary.
They're temporary, and they're often not connected to some underlying skill or value that makes people want to come back.
Yeah.
The algorithms, ultimately, they reward consistency, they reward session time, not just one big flash.
So the person chasing virality ends up performing for like the algorithm's short attention span.
Yeah. Instead of developing something, a voice, a skill, a perspective that would still be valuable even if that platform vanished tomorrow, you're optimizing for the platform, not for the actual human connection or the skill itself.
It's a strategic mistake then.
It really is. By focusing only on luck, on that fleeting metric, you actually stunt your own growth. You don't learn how to take feedback, how to adapt when trends change, or just how to keep getting better.
Why not?
Because you're too busy trying to recreate the high of that one perfect thing you already did. You're looking backward, not forward.
Okay, that sets us up perfectly for the alternative then. If the instant rush is usually a trap, what does success that lasts actually look like? What are its qualities? Let's get into the power of skill and consistency.
Right. And the shift needed here, it's entirely internal. It's moving away from needing that external sums up all the time towards internal accountability. The key strategy, woven through all the source material, is an absolute focus on learning and improving.
Okay.
Committing to the process every day, whether the metrics look good today or not.
So give me a practical example. What does that learning and improving look like compared to, say, editing another quick prank video?
Okay. Well, the difference is really in how you measure progress. The viral creator, they're looking at views on one video. Success or failure, right there.
Binary.
Yeah. The skill-based creator. They measure success by the tiny improvements in their process. Maybe it's learning a really complex new technique that takes ages but makes future work better. Or writing 100 terrible drafts to find 5 good ideas. Or, and this is hard, deliberately seeking out tough, critical feedback from people who know their stuff.
Yeah.
Just to raise your own baseline quality. It's that deliberate practice that often doesn't feel good right away.
Right, it lacks the immediate dopamine hit.
Completely lacks it.
Okay, this brings us to what feels like the big aha moment in the research. The central irony, maybe. We're taught, you have to chase the spotlight to get successful. But the sources say it's almost the opposite.
It really is counterintuitive. But yes, the people who just put their heads down and focus purely on learning, improving, building undeniable value, they end up famous anyway.
Yeah.
That's the phrase used. It's like value has its own gravity.
Okay, unpack that. Why does that happen?
Well, if you get really, really good at solving a specific problem, or entertaining people reliably, or creating something beautiful consistently, the audience eventually finds you. They have to.
Because you've built something real.
Something substantial, something repeatable. A production line of quality, if you want to think of it that way. Visibility ends up following the value. It almost never leads it. Not sustainably anyway.
And that sustainable quality, that's what gives you the long career, the relevance over years, not just weeks.
When you commit to that process of continuous learning, you build trust. Your audience, your clients, whoever, they know what they're going to get from you. It's reliable.
Which leads us to a kind of core rule from all of this analysis.
I think so. The immutable rule seems to be consistency always wins. Always. It's not the single biggest spike that defines long-term success. It's the baseline.
It's the consistent, reliable output that builds habits both for you as the creator and for the audience consuming it. And that's what everyone, including the platforms, ultimately rewards.
It feels like a totally different reward system.
Yeah.
The instant fame person is chasing the quick payout.
Yeah.
The skilled creator is like banking trust over time.
Yeah.
Residual trust.
That's a great way to put it. And that trust, that's what enables sustainable ways to make a living from it. Subscriptions, actual sales, loyal clients, because people are buying into you, the source of the value, not just the one-hit wonder product. Okay, so this brings us to the bottom line. The core difference that you listening really need to grasp. Yes, it boils down to this. Skill creates sustainability. That's the thesis we found, just confirmed again and again in the sources. Fame might give you attention for a bit. Skill gives you relevance that lasts. And control.
And control. The ability to pivot, to adapt, to steer your own path when things inevitably change. Control over your own story.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap what we've pulled out here. Instant fame gives you that massive, addictive rush, but zero direction.
Zero direction.
It chains you to chasing luck, leads to burnout, and can leave you feeling, useless when the luck inevitably runs dry.
Right. Whereas committing to skill, that builds consistency. It builds real intrinsic value.
And that foundation leads to success that lasts. And, kind of ironically, it often leads to the very recognition that the fame chasers were after all along, just in a more staple way.
Exactly. So we'd really encourage you listening right now to apply this lens to whatever you're working on this week. Are you focusing on the easy number, the quick win that feels good today? Or are you investing in the hard stuff, the sometimes frustrating grind that might actually pay off massively over the next year or two? Are you building a skill or just, optimizing for a fleeting viral moment?
And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on. If your goal is that long-term sustainability, that professional freedom, what's one specific foundational skill, maybe one that's kind of painful to learn, one that offers absolutely no instant dopamine? What skill are you committing to really master this week?
Not just try, master.
Yeah, master the mechanics. Even if nobody notices what you're doing for the next 6 months, think about the value that commitment creates internally and how that value eventually just might create its own spotlight. Okay, so let's kick off this deep dive today with a question that's kind of simple, but really makes you think. It comes straight from the material we're looking at. Imagine this. What if our parents, or maybe grandparents, suddenly became like super active on social media, posting constantly, scrolling, maybe even trying to make something go viral? What would they honestly make of how we use these platforms?
That's a great starting point because, it throws you right into that generational tension, doesn't it? We're digging into some excerpts from this really insightful discussion called Social Media, Performance versus Reality. And it basically maps out this fundamental clash, how older generations thought about success versus how it's defined now by, being visible online.
Absolutely. And when you kind of boil it down, you see this really stark contrast. Back then, success for our parents maybe was about tangible results, right? And earning respect, things you could point to. But now it feels like the metrics are all about instant feedback, performing publicly, racking up those likes.
Exactly. So our goal here in this deep dive is really to unpack the sort of psychological shift behind all that. For you listening, think of this as a way to understand what happens when, achieving something just for yourself isn't enough anymore. When you feel this pressure to prove it to everyone else online, we need to look at the real cost of, turning your life into content.
Okay, let's get into that. Starting with the historical angle. Where does the source say this friction really begins?
Well, the source goes right into it. It argues that the previous generation, they operated on this principle of showing results, not posting progress. That's the key phrase. Their whole worldview is built on the idea that, effort happens behind the scenes, it's private. Success was only really proven when you had something concrete to show for it. The finished project, the stable career, the actual outcome.
That distinction really changes the game, doesn't it? Like if you're building something physical, a house, let's say, or even just, a complicated report for work, you don't get the pat on the back until the house is standing or the report makes sense. All the process stuff, the early mornings, the planning, the screw-ups that was supposed to be your own business, private labor.
Precisely. You showed up, you did the work. That was it. You didn't need to, broadcast the act of working. And the analysis in the source suggests that maybe our parents' generation would look at a lot of what happens on social media now.
Yeah.
And just think, that's just posing,
Yeah.
Because they don't see the finished product that justifies all the noise. They see someone publicizing the effort, which to them just looks completely performative.
All right. The output is what mattered. But what about the ultimate goal? What was the real currency of success back then versus now? Our source draws a really clear line here.
Yeah. And this is probably the most important takeaway from this first part. The source argues that the main goal, the core belief for that older generation, was about earning respect. And respect is, it's hard-won, isn't it? You earn it privately, usually over a long time, through your actions, your integrity, the actual results you produce. It's solid. It lasts.
Whereas today's default metric is often likes you collect out in the open instantly, usually for just one curated snapshot or post. It's low-cost validation, but high volume. So that shift from chasing long-term respect to collecting instant likes, that sums up the generational gap pretty neatly.
It really does, because it changes behavior completely. If you want respect, you focus on the quality of your work, the outcome. If you want likes, you have to focus on the performance, how visible it is, how often you post. And that need for visibility leads us straight into the next big theme, this modern performance imperative.
Okay, so this is where we shift gears. From doing things for ourselves to feeling like we have to do things for an audience, for the camera. The source talks about this modern pressure point, this underlying fear almost of being invisible. And it puts it really bluntly. If you don't post it, people assume you haven't done anything.
just stop and think about the psychological weight of that single idea. It's huge.
Yeah.
It implies that our achievements, they've kind of lost their built-in value. Getting the degree, the promotion, working on yourself, those things are almost secondary now. What really seems to count is the external proof, the documentation. If there's no post, did it even really happen?
Yeah, it's not enough to be successful anymore. You have to be seen performing success on your feed. The source seems to implicitly question, like, how authentic is an achievement if the main reason you did it was so you could post about it?
And you can't ignore the role the platforms themselves play here. Social media doesn't just encourage performance. It practically demands it if you want to stay relevant, right? Mm-hmm. The algorithms reward visibility, interaction. So naturally, our lives start to feel like raw material for content.
Yeah.
If you need visibility for people to think you're valid, then every single thing you do becomes a potential post, a content opportunity.
Can we talk more about that mental load? Like, say someone's training for a marathon. In the old way of thinking, the reward was crossing the finish line. Simple. But now it feels like they're doing two things at once. They're running the race, and they're producing the documentary about running the race.
That is a perfect analogy. Absolutely. The actual accomplishment, the sheer physical and mental effort of training it, almost takes a backseat to crafting the story about it. So you're not just thinking about your pace or staying hydrated, you're also thinking, okay, where's the best spot for a photo op at mile 10? The energy it takes to keep up that digital persona, the runner identity online, that energy gets pulled away from just being the runner. And that's a huge psychological drain, often one we don't even notice.
You're basically spending energy performing the role instead of just living the experience. Which leads us right into the core insight from the source material, what they call the reality gap. This really gets at the ultimate psychological price tag of all this performing.
Right. This is where the deep dive really earns its name, I think.
Yeah.
If you connect those dots, the instant metrics like likes and this constant pressure to perform, you land on the source's most powerful and honestly kind of a setting conclusion.
And they state it so clearly, it really hits home. People now live to prove they're doing well instead of actually being well. Wow. I mean, that single sentence just captures the whole paradox of digital life for me.
It really speaks to how we sacrifice our internal state for the sake of external appearances. We pour so much emotional energy into crafting this perfect online story. Look how well I'm doing, how happy, how successful. But often that comes at the direct expense of how we actually feel inside. We're giving up being present, being genuinely okay in the moment, just for that quick hit of validation we get later when we prove our wellness to others.
So we're like managing the image of joy, but maybe missing out on the actual feeling. Think about all that diverted energy, editing the photo just right, crafting the perfect witty caption, checking the likes, replying to comments. That's energy and time fundamentally taken away from just savoring the moment, experiencing the thing we're posting about.
And it forces you to ask, well, what is genuine fulfillment then? If you're constantly being pulled out of the experience itself, whether it's dinner with friends, enjoying a view, or even just a quiet moment of personal achievement, pulled out by the need to capture it, frame it, share it for later, are you truly getting that deep internal satisfaction from your life? The source suggests pretty strongly that the answer is probably no.
Which brings us to that final, really sobering irony that the discussion points out. This whole performance mindset creates this loop, this treadmill, where the end result is that people are, and I'm quoting again, running to show off a life they're not even enjoying.
Exactly. The performance itself becomes the barrier. It blocks genuine enjoyment. We construct this amazing, optimized, happy-looking digital self, right? But the effort of maintaining that avatar, constantly feeding it new content, managing its online reputation, responding to the notifications, it takes so much out of us, so much emotional labor, that the actual person behind the screen feels depleted. They can't actually live or enjoy the reality they've worked so hard to portray. They're performing themselves right out of happiness. And the source is clear. This cycle is really damaging to actual well-being.
That is such a powerful way to put it. It really captures that paradox we bump up against every day. So wrapping up this deep dive, what does all this mean for us, as we keep using these platforms?
Well, we've really traced that core tension, haven't we? The clash between the old school values respect earned through results and the new school focus on likes gathered through performance.
Yeah.
And we've laid out that pretty stark reality gap, the cost of pouring energy into proving you're okay instead of just being okay.
Right. And hopefully this gives you, the listener, a kind of filter now when you're scrolling through your feed or even thinking about your own posts. You have some tools to analyze what's going on. Are you seeing real results that likely earned genuine respect? Or is it mostly curated progress updates designed to get quick likes? Are people sharing something they truly seem to enjoy in the moment, or are they maybe just managing the appearance of a moment they had to step away from to document?
Yeah, it encourages that little bit of critical distance, which is probably healthy. Distance from the stuff we consume, but also the stuff we create. It helps us maybe tell the difference between, a real signal of achievement and just the noise of performance aimed at getting validation.
Absolutely. And so as you step away from this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought to maybe mull over. It builds directly on what we've discussed from the source. Okay, so if respect is earned privately through real results and likes are gathered publicly, often just by posting progress, how do you in your own life think about prioritizing showing your actual results versus just posting your progress? It's definitely something we're thinking about.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, today we're jumping into some really fascinating notes, all focused on achievement, but specifically long-term achievement.
Right.
Our sources really highlight this core conflict, something I think everyone feels when they're working on something meaningful. It's that fight between wanting speed, viral success, views.
Instant gratification.
Exactly. Versus the long, sometimes difficult path of building something real, something lasting, that foundational competence.
Yeah, and that tension, it really defines the modern landscape, doesn't it? Everything pushes us towards these instant, visible wins. Social media, metrics at work.
Totally.
So our mission today, I think, is to really dig into the principles for sustainable success, pulling straight from this material you've gathered. We're looking for that counterintuitive wisdom, the stuff that helps you finish the marathon when everyone else is just sprinting for a headline.
Absolutely. It feels like we're kind of dissecting the instruction manual for people who actually build things that, matter in the long run. And the core idea tying it all together seems simple, but it's actually profoundly difficult to live by today. We're going to explore why hard work never goes out of style, and crucially, how consistency, even though people often call it slow, is maybe the only path to building a legacy that lasts.
It really is a deep dive into success itself, isn't it? And the real shortcut, maybe, is realizing there are no actual shortcuts, not when the goal is something durable.
Right.
You just have to commit to the work. And the sources start right there, making it clear that the power of deep, committed hard work is, well, it's the fundamental building block.
I couldn't agree more, but okay, here's where my pragmatic side kicks in, and I think listeners feel this too. In a market moving so fast, isn't there just immense pressure to look efficient, to move fast, or just get completely ignored?
Oh, definitely.
How do we square that unwavering strength of hard work with this modern demand for velocity?
That is the challenge, and it's what the sources tackle head on. See, the issue isn't that hard work isn't effective. Of course it is. The issue is how we perceive the timeline. When people look at sustained effort, that slow, deliberate building, they often don't see the work. They see inefficiency. They see wasted time because the results aren't immediate. They aren't flashy and shareable right now.
Yeah, they see it as like a lack of optimization. Like you're still using dial-up when fiber optic is right there.
Exactly. But these sources, they give us that essential reframe. They help us recognize the purpose of that perceived delay. It's not about a lack of speed. It's actually about an increase in resilience.
Interesting.
As one of the authors puts it, and this is key, the problem is people call it slow. But slow is sustainable. That's really the first big aha moment here, I think. Redefining slow, not as a failure, but as a positive, a necessary feature for durability, permanence.
Okay, so if we accept that slow is sustainable, that totally shifts how we judge our own pace, right?
It has to.
But what's the risk if we reject this? If slow builds sustainability, what does rushing create? The material seems to give a pretty stark warning about, superficial achievement, skipping steps, trading structure for speed.
It's issuing a warning based on the basic laws of structural integrity.
Yeah.
Think about achievement like architecture, okay?
Right.
If you try to build a huge visible skyscraper, that's the success everyone chases, but you skip the deep foundation, the pilings, all that underground work, what happens?
It just falls over.
Yeah.
Or the first strong wind.
Yeah, exactly. It collapses under its own weight, or it can't withstand any real pressure.
It seems so intuitive when you put it like that.
Yeah.
But in the chase for visibility, for views, it feels like the foundation is the first thing people sacrifice. We focus on the shiny facade, not the unseen structure.
And the sources are crystal clear about the result of rushing that structure. Fame without foundation collapses fast. And this isn't just about, disappointing your audience or having a project fail. This is about internal collapse too. If you haven't taken the time to really develop the skills, learn to adapt, build true resilience, the moment real pressure hits, criticism, competition, market shifts, whatever, there's nothing solid holding it all up.
So is that collapse usually triggered by external stuff? Or is it more often internal, like burnout? Or just not being able to handle the pressure because you haven't actually mastered the skills needed?
It's often both, but I'd argue the root cause is that internal fragility. The person who rushes to fame often lacks the deeply practiced processes, the internal capability needed to actually sustain it.
Right.
They become completely dependent on external validation, on always performing at peak. So when those external metrics dip or the pressure ramps up, they just don't have the adaptable skills or the core resilience to pivot or even just weather the storm. It's often a spectacular, exhausting kind of failure, not just a simple business downturn.
Wow, yeah. That hits hard. Because fame, views, visibility, those are often the first things we chase. Sometimes long before we've actually nailed the core skill or offering. Okay, so if rushing leads to collapse, we need the antidote. If a solid foundation prevents collapse, and we know we need to commit to slow, what's the single biggest tool for actually building that foundation day after day?
It's the answer nobody wants to hear because it's the most unexciting, unshareable thing you can possibly do, which is why most people skip it.
Richard.
Consistency.
Of course.
It's the engine of legacy precisely because it can feel boring in the moment.
I think we almost have to redefine boring there. Because if consistency is the difference between a flash in the pan and a career that actually lasts, maybe it becomes the most strategically exciting move you can make.
That's a great way to put it.
It's those small compounding efforts, right? They look almost invisible day to day, but they build mountains over years.
That is exactly the nuance these notes capture. Consistency is the mechanism for compounding returns. In skills, in knowledge, in trust. It's not about massive dramatic leaps. It's about showing up, making a tiny improvement, and then just repeating that process again and again.
300 times, like you said.
Exactly. The sources nail this distinction. Consistency may not look exciting, but it builds legacy.
I really like that framing. Consistency isn't some chore you have to endure. It's a powerful building tool. It forces depth.
Yes.
It means you're consciously trading that quick dopamine hit of a viral moment for the deep structural integrity of something that lasts decades. Like laying bricks carefully one by one instead of just stacking flimsy panels quickly.
Absolutely. Think about mastering any complex skill. You don't become a great coder or writer or musician by having one amazing, intense week.
Right.
You do it by consistently coding or writing or practicing, even on the days when it feels like drudgery, when the results are just okay. Until that skill becomes second nature, truly internalized. So when you redefine exciting away from just external validation towards internal capability, consistency suddenly feels like the most fundamental, even thrilling thing you can focus on.
Okay, this definitely requires a big shift then. A shift in motivation, in what we measure. If we're actively choosing not to chase immediate excitement or speed, and we know just counting views can lead to fragility, what should we be chasing? How do we track progress during those long, seemingly unexciting periods of building?
We absolutely have to change the focus. It has to be about internal contribution, not outward presentation, substance over signaling. Always.
Substance over signaling, I like that.
The market, the culture, even our own egos, they all encourage us to count the likes, the clicks, the views. But if those metrics lead down a path to fragility, we need a healthier, more durable way to measure progress.
So we stop counting the immediate external stuff and start measuring something deeper. What is that deeper thing?
The material offers this really powerful advice. When you focus on value instead of views, you create something that actually matters.
Okay, value.
But this means we have to get serious about defining value. It isn't just visibility or popularity. It's the inherent quality, the depth, the insight, the usefulness, the help provided. The things that contribute real substance, whether or not they get immediate applause.
But how do you measure that? Especially when views are so easy to see. Can you give a concrete example? Like, for a writer, is the value, the depth of research and the quality of the argument, even if only 50 people read the article?
Precisely. The value is the insight delivered or the problem solved for those 50 people or the quality of the craft itself. That's the structure, the views. That's more like the sugar rush. It feels good, but it doesn't nourish.
Okay.
Think about a software developer. One focused on value prioritizes writing clean, sustainable code. Well-documented stuff that prevents future problems and lasts for years, even if it means the launch takes longer.
Right.
A developer focused only on views or shipping fast might rush out a flashy but buggy feature just to make an announcement. One creates lasting value, the other creates immediate buzz but future headaches.
I see the inherent conflict. Focusing on value almost naturally slows you down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because a quality, real substance, it just takes time.
It does.
It forces you to prioritize that internal structure over the external announcement.
Right.
So by chasing substance, you're kind of automatically building the foundation that lasts because it actually contributes something solid.
And that closes the whole loop, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You commit to the hard work, you embrace consistency because you're prioritizing value, which forces that slow and sustainable timeline, which ultimately prevents the collapse that comes from rushed, superficial success.
Right.
You end up creating something that might still be useful, still relevant 5 or 10 years down the line, long after the momentary viral hits have completely vanished.
This brings us right to the final insight, really. It's pulling together the hard work, the sustainability, the value, but applying it directly to the listener's own timeline, their own journey. It's about having the patience, maybe the courage, to see the structure through without needing that immediate external pat on the back.
Absolutely. The overarching advice here really speaks to self-awareness and maybe self-respect too. You, the listener, need to trust your process and your timeline, not the arbitrary pace set by the outside world, which is just obsessed with speed. Remember, that outside world, it only ever sees the finished building. It has no idea about the years you might spend digging the foundation.
Yeah, it's about letting the needs of the structure dictate the pace, not the desire for applause.
That's the core takeaway. The sources wrap it up with this really clear directive. Don't rush your story just to look successful. That just perfectly encapsulates the whole theme. If you rush the presentation, the facade, not only will it likely crumble, but you're actually cheating yourself out of developing the depth and resilience you need for genuine lasting achievement. The internal structure absolutely has to come before the external show.
That is such a powerful and I think necessary message today. Sustainable success. It comes from slow, consistent building, focusing ruthlessly on internal value, not getting distracted by the noise of external views. That feels like the real shortcut to being well-informed about building something that actually matters. A legacy.
And so maybe here's the application point for you, the listener, to think about today. If your goal truly is legacy, something meaningful, something that lasts, then take a hard look at your current projects, your goals. Is there one decision you're making right now that's purely about speed or getting those external views?
Good question.
Can you choose deliberately to delay that or reevaluate it, to spend that energy strengthening the foundation instead? Maybe make one small commitment today to embrace that idea. Slow is sustainable.
An excellent challenge to take away. Thank you so much for diving into this with us and really helping unpack the true meaning behind consistent structural effort. It's definitely counterintuitive sometimes.
My pleasure. It's crucial stuff.
We look forward to having you back for the next deep dive.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, our mission, well, it's really focused on ambition, growth, and maybe that tricky difference between just being popular and having real substance underneath. We've been digging into this great source, fame, purpose, and patient growth. And honestly, it cuts through a lot of the noise around, modern success.
It really does. And they don't mess around. Right away, they hit you with this core question. It's almost uncomfortable, but it shapes everything. If you're aiming for visibility, it could be your career, your art, your business, whatever, if you want to be seen, you have to ask yourself, really ask, famous for what?
Oof. Yeah, that question just slices right through the vanity metrics, doesn't it? For us, for you listening, trying to navigate this world obsessed with viral hits and follower counts, the conflict is right there. Are we just chasing the outcome, the fame, the likes, or are we really focused on the foundation, the purpose that makes it worthwhile in the first place?
That's the absolute core tension for anyone building something today. Are you building the appearance of success or the actual architecture of it? You see it all the time, right? These impressive looking things that, they look great from a distance,
Right.
but up close, the foundations are shaky. Because the main goal was just getting noticed fast. The source argues you got to flip that completely. Purpose first, then profile.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. Because the source is super clear on this difference between, empty popularity and success with purpose. They call it noise versus voice.
And what's interesting is they're not saying fame itself is bad, not at all. It's fame without an anchor. That's the problem. They put it so well. Fame without meaning is noise, but fame built on purpose becomes a voice. Noise is, well, it's chasing trends, it's clickbait, it's that constant need for shock value just to stay visible,
Yeah, noise feels like something you have to keep cranking up louder and louder just to be heard. It sounds exhausting. High volume, low substance. But a voice, a purposeful voice, that lands differently. It resonates. It means people follow because what you offer actually matters to them. It's valuable or useful or just meaningful.
Yeah.
Not just because you're loud.
Exactly. And think about the long-term damage of noise. Why is it so bad? Because it warps your own motivation as the creator. If noise is what got you attention, you attract an audience that's there for the show, not the substance. The second you try to pivot or settle into doing the real work, poof, they're gone. Leads to huge churn, creator burnout. It's a rough cycle.
So the cost isn't just wasted time, it's getting stuck. You can't pivot easily, and you're just exhausted trying to keep the spectacle going. But I have to ask this, because I think it's what a lot of people wonder. When you're starting out, don't you need some noise, some popularity, just to get noticed enough to even start building a voice?
That's a really fair question, and a critical one. What the authors seem to imply is that even that first bit of visibility shouldn't compromise your purpose. They advise, focus on passion, not popularity. If you do that, the initial traction you get, even if it's small, it's targeted. You're finding the right people, the ones who actually care about your why. Maybe it's 1,000 really engaged people who get the passion versus 100,000 who just clicked on a gimmick. That first group, that's your foundation for a voice. The second, that's just static, temporary.
Okay. That reframes it completely. Focus on passion. The work itself is rewarding, makes it sustainable before you even get noticed much. Success becomes about quality. How good is this thing? Not just quantity, how many people saw it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that focus on sustainable quality, it leads us straight into the next big theme, patience. Because building something with purpose, establishing that resonant voice, well, it just takes time. Patience is the partner to purpose.
Yeah.
And it's often the thing that's most missing today.
Right. So we're shifting from what to focus on purpose to how long patient growth. The source has this really lovely, almost calming observation about it. The best things grow slowly and silently.
Yeah, think about it like a giant redwood tree or maybe a big intellectual movement. They don't just pop up overnight, do they? There's this long, quiet period where the roots, the skills, the integrity, the mission are getting strong under the surface, unseen. We're so conditioned now, especially digitally, to expect instant exponential growth. But real depth, that usually needs a long stretch of quiet iteration, laying foundations. You just can't rush it.
So why are we so resistant to that time then? It feels like you've hit on it. The platforms reward immediacy. We're chasing that quick dopamine hit, right? The notification, the like, the view count. And that makes the slow, quiet work feel, well, almost pointless sometimes.
It creates this real practical tension. You've got the instant gratification metrics fighting against the slow, sustainable development you need for something lasting. Those instant metrics, they show attention now, but they don't necessarily show actual value, real growth, the kind that makes your work endure. That often shows up later. It's a lagging indicator. You won't see it right away.
Yeah.
But if you keep putting in the quality work, the results, they tend to come eventually, and they stick around.
It's a battle, isn't it? Between the number you see flashing on your screen and the purpose you feel inside. If you rush the foundation to get those numbers up, you just weaken the whole thing. The difference between something lasting a century and something lasting, I don't know, a few months. It's almost always that unseen patient work at the base.
Which is exactly why the authors highlighted one particular piece of advice. They said it was worth framing, putting up on the wall. It hits this tension directly, speaks right to anyone wrestling with today's metrics. The key takeaway is this: be patient with your journey, not obsessed with your followers.
Wow. That phrase, it feels incredibly freeing. Because it's like a direct antidote to comparison culture. If you're obsessed with followers, you're constantly looking over your shoulder, right? Checking what others are doing, comparing your numbers, judging your work by this external scoreboard that, well, it doesn't really reflect the quality or the effort inside.
It totally reframes what success even looks like. It shifts it from an external followers, likes, what the competition's doing, to an internal state. How good is my work? How solid is my process? Am I staying true to my mission? If you're obsessing over followers, you're just reacting all the time, reacting to external validation. And that pulls you away from the deep internal work needed for patient growth. Patience lets you tune out the noise and actually hone your voice.
So the practical advice is simple, but maybe really hard to do. Keep your head down, trust your process. The idea is the numbers will eventually catch up to the substance, but you can't force the substance just by chasing numbers. You have to prioritize the substance first.
Exactly right. So, okay, we've established the best work comes from purpose, and it's built with patience. Let's synthesize these lessons, purpose, patience, into some clear takeaways. For application. What does the person who successfully builds a voice, not just noise, actually do? What are the characteristics?
Well, the source gives us a pretty powerful checklist. One of the original speakers summed it up with this really essential Paul. Work hard, stay humble, and build something real.
That combination, hard work and humility, it's crucial because it stops the ego running away with things. If you think your success means you can stop working hard, you're done. If fame makes you think you've mastered it all, you stop growing. Humility here means, it means being willing to keep learning, keep iterating, keep doing that foundational work, even when everyone's telling you you're great.
And that idea of building something real, that loops right back to the start, doesn't it? The critique of fame just for fame's sake. If your goal is just the spectacle, what you build is often flimsy. A viral moment, a passing trend, a facade. But if your goal is building something real, a solid product, a truly helpful service, a body of work with integrity, then fame, if it comes, it's just a side effect. Your work is anchored in actual utility, not just grabbing attention.
It's the difference between focusing on the press release versus focusing on the actual performance, right? Real things offer something tangible. They solve a problem, create lasting beauty, whatever it is. Fame-based things are often just momentary distractions. Focus on utility, and your work has a chance to be durable, valuable, regardless of platform shifts or changing audience tastes.
Yeah, it points towards durability. And then finally, connecting back to that slow, quiet growth and integrity. The very last piece of advice was about aiming for fewer shortcuts. Ah, the shortcut. It's the enemy of building something real, isn't it? Because shortcuts almost always bypass that silent, slow growth period. That's where purpose gets solid, where the work gains its depth. A shortcut might give you quick visibility, sure, but it skips the learning curve. It skips the necessary failures. It skips the deep work that actually builds a true voice. So to kind of wrap up our deep dive today, real, meaningful success seems to be defined by why you're doing it your purpose and how patiently, how humbly you build that foundation.
That really covers it. A great look at the source material. And it leaves us and you listening with a final thought to maybe chew on as you get back to your own work. If fame built on purpose becomes a voice, and the advice is fewer shortcuts, we have to ask, what's one immediate non-shortcut action you can take, maybe even today, an action to make sure your work is serving its real purpose instead of just chasing volume or quick visibility? What foundational step are you maybe skipping right now? Something to think about. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.